I call this meeting to order at 5:06 p.m. I will pull up the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at that?
Yes.
If I can remember how to share content. Okay. Everyone can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, this is such a mess. I'm so sorry, everyone.
You're fine.
All right. I recognize that Acha is here, Joshua is here, Victor is here, Aaliyah is here, Pooja is here, and Siri is here, as well as ex officio members Candace and Courtney, as well as some members of the undergraduate population. The agenda, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the agenda for July 21st.
Second.
Are there any objections? I hear no objections, so with general consent, the agenda is approved. If you remember from last meeting, the June 19th minutes were tabled, but I was able to complete them today. So we're going to look over those. By the way, for anyone who's wondering, you can go into the minutes and comment and make any suggestions if you see something that's wrong or along those lines. So I just want to encourage everyone, if they have the chance or the time, to look over minutes and make some suggestions. But other than that, I'll just scroll through it. All 8 pages of it. All right. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 19th?
I move to approve meetings from June 19th.
Second.
Are there any objections? I hear no objections. So by general consent, the meeting minutes from June 19th are approved. And then we're going to go to the minutes for the last meeting. Again, I'll just scroll through that. And with that, to approve the minutes from July 9th.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from July.
I second.
Are there any objections? I hear and see no objections, so by general consent, the meeting minutes from July 9th have been approved. And now we can move on to our new business, which is kind of old business if you think about it. But we have the Sahas funding discussion for fall 2020. Is there a motion to enter discussion?
I move to enter the discussion for JR 03 2021. Sorry, Sahas funding discussion fall 2020.
Second.
Are there any objections? I hear no objections, so by general consent, we are entering a period of discussion for our undergraduate population that is being represented here. You can participate in the discussion. I don't know why that was so hard for me to get out, but again, if you have something you would like to say, please put me next I have a question in chat so that I can recognize you. I want everyone to have their opinions spoken on, especially on these matters. But again, this is a continuation of what we discussed last time. Candace, I believe, wanted to, I think we were looking at off-campus requests. Did you want us to look over that in the meeting, or was that just more of a personal kind of?
Yes. I think you all need to again I think you should remind everyone like what happened the last meeting in terms of the student activity fee, the context around student organization events related to the email or information that was sent out by events and conference services, and then also the SGA budget. Like I think all of that needs to sort of be reminded. And if you want, I can do that. But I think everyone needs to just be reminded about where we are in order to continue the conversation around on-campus events and off-campus events.
Yes. So for those of you who may not have been here last meeting, and for a refresher, our discussion started with a email from ECS stating that all fall events and their requests were being pulled from 25 Live. So we are assuming that there are no on-campus in-person events for fall 2020. And spring 2021 is also being postponed. They are not going to look at any of those requests on 25 Live. Later in that discussion, we talked about how the university themselves may be hosting events and how they may be doing that. And we decided that as a finance board, we didn't want to fund events where students' health and safety were put on the line. There's another thing from the university, a regulation that they also have for their on-campus events. It's basically two guidelines. Is your event mission critical, and can it be done online? So if it can't happen online, they'll probably find a way to help you. But they really want to promote the health and safety and try and introduce everything related to COVID, basically. So that was the discussion. And then later on, we had voted on a piece of legislation that was a deduction of the student activities fee, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically the SGA's fee, and it's used for funding clubs and orgs, funding the charter organizations such as SEB and the Retriever, and it provides the stipends and salaries of all SGA members and faculty/staff. We decided to cut it down 50% so that students, given the refunds that were made last semester as well, we were cutting it so that students wouldn't have to pay the full price since they're not using it, basically, and that we can still maintain funding for those things that we need to look over. With that said, Candace, was there anything I missed?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's how all of those pieces are interconnected, right? So I think the only thing I would add is that the cancellation of all of the student organization events is something that leads to the funding for those events to be then canceled per your budgetary policy and funding guidelines. So since all of those events were canceled, the funding attached to those events is canceled. And I think that's something that needs to be communicated to student organizations so that it's clear to them. I also think that you all need to, sort of the next part of this conversation for you all is, okay, so now what? what are you going to do for student organizations because all their events have been canceled, taking into account that, you know, there are all of these restrictions on campus events and off-campus events, for that matter, that the university has to abide by, which trickles down to SGA and student organizations. So there are all of these restrictions around what can and can't be done. And so how do you, and because of those restrictions, and the inability to do a lot of that programming, you've reduced your student activity fee. So because you can't do as much, you're charging students less. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some sort of opportunity for student organizations to request funding in some manner for virtual events through your secondary ad hoc allocation system. And so really the conversation, I think, as I would advise it, is to say how much, how are you going to communicate this to student organizations, and how much money do you want to ask for? And also you probably will need to pass some kind of legislation for this year because this goes against your budgetary statutes. So that's where I think you are at right now.
Thank you, Candace. Oh, I was gonna call on Aaliyah, but she said never mind. So with that, are there any questions, concerns, any confusion? Joshua?
I think that my question is, and I don't know if this actually can be stated because it's not solidified, but I was wondering if Siri could actually share with the board what her Mashad are thinking when it comes to the budget, and how they're reworking that, and what are the implications of that reworking for student organizations, and how much money will be left in that pot. And again, I don't know if that can be shared, but that's just where my head goes next.
Yeah, so it'll be better if we wait a while to share that because we're still working on it. I don't really like to put out information that's not really close to being finalized yet. But yeah, me, Candace, and Rashad met last week on Friday, I think. Yeah, we went over the budget. We made about $120,000 cut because since we reduced student fees 50%, we're about $250,000 we're gonna lose. And this morning we met with Vladimir to discuss if he could potentially reduce the fee we give to OCSS. So we're thinking about 50%. So he said he has to talk to people and he's gonna get back to us. And we have more meetings to have with people that we that we give out money to. So right now we're still working on it. So I don't want to really go too into it. Maybe by next week or the week after that we can propose the budget and let you guys all know about it.
So wait, one question. Sarah, am I allowed to continue speaking or do I have to be recognized again? I'm not sure about that.
Go ahead. Nobody else is asking in the chat.
Cool. And so off of that point, this conversation, if we are to set an amount for how much we have in Sahas, would that be almost like a request of this needs to be taken into account when it comes to forming the budget for next year? Or because I'm not quite sure what that order looks like. Will it be us saying this is the number that we want to work off of? Or is it Siri and Rashad and Candace setting the amount that we then have? So that's another point of clarification that I just think would be helpful personally.
Candace?
I think it depends on where you want that direction to come from, right? So if you want to lead that conversation, I would recommend formalizing a request to Siri and Rashad to say, we know you're redoing the budget. We would like to have this amount of money to be able to use during fall for Sahas requests. Can you please take that into consideration when doing the budget? And then they get to decide if they want to do that. Now, I will say this, the budget still does have to be passed by both Senate and Finance Board. So if it comes to Finance Board and you don't see what you need or have requested in the student allocation pot, you can vote that budget down. That is your power. So having it be a collaborative process and asking for what you need, I think is probably your best strategy forward, especially since they are still working on it. That being said, that in the conversations that I had with Siri and Rashad, they are very cognizant of there being like and aware that there needs to be money left in that student org pot for organizations to be able to access during the fall. So that is something that was important to them in those conversations. Where that dollar amount is going to sit at the end, I don't know. But as Siri said, at the moment, they've cut about $120,000 from the $333,000 pot. But that's not final. It could be less, it could be more. But right now, that's where they're sitting.
Yes, and like Candace pretty much explained, that's why we didn't really loop that like anyone else in yet, because like it's really unfinished. Like it's just like early stages. We still have about like 4 more meetings to have with other student orgs, and we already knew we had to get the budget passed by the Senate and Finance Board anyway, so we knew you guys were going to be able to see it. But yeah, you could definitely send us a request, and we'll definitely take that into consideration. But as Candace said, we're already looking into, of course, having money for that.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Gerson?
Yeah, Gerson. Yeah.
Okay.
So for these proposals, by when should we submit them if we have any proposals to propose? Like when would be the deadline to submit these?
Are you asking about the budget? Sorry, am I supposed to talk? I don't. But are you asking about the budget or just proposals in general?
Just proposals in general, I guess, to summarize it, generalize it.
I saw Acha first in the chat. Is that a question or an answer to Gerson?
I think it was kind of an answer because I was saying that if it's like for the fall, I think the way we're moving forward is we're moving forward with orgs coming with the proposals as Sahas requests, but I don't know. So that doesn't have to be like sent into like the general overall budget because it's going to be taken from the pot that's in the Sahas. But us moving forward, we have to know how much money we're putting into the Sahas pool for orgs to grab from. Is my understanding of how to move forward.
Definitely. Candace?
And to continue off of what Acha was saying, once it'll be a first come, first serve once it is opened up to student organizations. Granted, you do have to be treasurer trained in order to request money. So your treasurer does have to be trained, and Siri's working on that. That'll be a part of leading orgs, which is going to happen for student organizations to get trained on that. But everybody will be notified when the application's open, but you also have to make sure your treasurer is trained in order to know how to do it. And then you could submit an application and they would be considered on a first come, first served basis. That's how Sahas works.
Thank you.
Pooja?
So, considering that this year's the funding budget will come from Sahas, and usually it's a 10% of the total budget. So, as a finance board, are we allowed to propose the percentage change to treasurer and president or not? Candice, if you can answer that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Candace.
Yeah, so yes, your budgetary guidelines state that you have to have 10% for every semester of like, so if there's $150,000 for the fall semester to dole out, 10% of that has to be reserved for Sahas. So that would be $15,000. But if you wanted to go against that, I think you would need to write some legislation, not that you're increasing the like that you are, because of COVID, because all the events were canceled, because you've reduced your student activity fee for fall 2020, this is how you're going to be allocating funds, knowing that that goes against your budgetary statutes, but you are in unprecedented times, and so that's why you're doing it. So there has to be something that you put into writing that says why you're doing it and what the impetus for it was, in order for you all to go against your budgetary statutes. That's why I mentioned before about like you should have some sort of legislation. The cutting of the money in the budget, that like if it's cut, right, because I mean it probably will be cut because you've reduced how much you're charging students their student activity fee, so you therefore have less money, and you're doing that because you're not allowed to do all of the things that you used to be allowed to do. So why ask people to pay for stuff that they can't do, right? So that part is not necessarily connected to how you all process through budget requests. You could have the overall student organization pot reduced by, $100,000 and then have all of the events canceled and still abide by your budgetary guidelines and say, okay, well, it says that 55% of the $200,000 needs to go to fall, so that's going to be 100 and some odd, so that means, and all of these other events were canceled, and so all of that money rolls to spring, so we only have $10,000 to allocate for Sahas. That does, but I don't think that that's what you want to do, right? Does that make sense?
Right.
It's a lot. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. The sense that I've gotten is that, you all are of the mindset that you want to make the most money available to student organizations for the fall while preserving funding for the possibility of on-campus events in spring. That's the sense I get. And so if that's what you want to do, I would recommend increasing the amount of money that you have available for Sahas while maintaining funding levels for spring as if the student organization pot had not been cut. And I'm sorry, am I giving that feedback, or is that coming from somewhere else? I don't know. Does that all make sense?
It does. And I was going to say, if I can just second the recommendation that you made and have a discussion on that with the other people in the board.
Pooja, what was that? I was dissociating.
Yeah, so Candace said that what we could do is that we could increase Sahas funding by keeping the percentage of fall, which is 55%, same. Like, is that something we all should want to have a discussion on or not?
Yes, I would like to have a discussion. I saw Joshua raising his hand. Oh, I don't know.
So if you're referring to when I put something in the chat, I have 2 points that I do want to make. I can make those really quickly. I'm not quite sure if I am like fully registering what you mean, Pooja. So if you could later on explain that just a little bit more. But just to spit out my 2 things, I wanted to talk about a timeline for Sahas and like what the entire budget process would look like. I think that if we could try to get to the start of the semester, that would be very beneficial. That way, the treasurers that are already trained can be able to put in those requests, and we can look at them as soon as possible. Because it would be to the disadvantage of organizations if we were to make that a last thing. And here we are, no one's actually able to use it because we're able to put it up early enough. And then the second point that I wanted is I feel like within like the next week, maybe, or a week and a half, we should try to get that request out to the people that are writing just so that they can take consideration, just to honor their time, make sure that we're staying like steadily moving along on this timeline that's effective and efficient. But if you back to your point, explain that a little bit more to clarify, I understand.
No, actually, after you stated your point, I feel like that's even a better recommendation. And yeah, we should. Yeah, I completely agree with what you said.
Okay.
Does that cover everything for you, Pooja?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So, Acha, I saw that you were in the chat.
Sorry. So I have like 2 questions. So the first one was like, are we going to place, although this hasn't been done previously, are we going to place like a limit on maybe the amount of student org can request Sahas funds to ensure everyone gets a chance, or is it just we're just going to keep first come first serve? Although I don't imagine that we're going to get to a point where everyone runs out, but just for that contingency, if we get all the Sahas requests and we calculate it and it's over, or are we just going to like get to that when we get to it? I don't know if I explained that well. Sorry, I can re-explain it if you need me to. If anyone has an answer, they can answer.
Candace.
Or a thought.
So currently your budgetary statutes state that you have a $33 per person limit on an event. So if there's 10 people that are going to be there, the maximum amount could be $330. The maximum an event could cost is, I think, $9,999 or something like that. Based on, and that is that number is based on campus occupancy of the largest space on campus being like the ballroom, and saying there's 300 people at that, 300 times 33, some 9,000, something like that. I don't know. I'm not math. I'm sure you all are. I don't math. So you do have some guidelines in your budgetary statutes. If you wanted to diverge from those for this semester, you would have to pass legislation as to why you wanted to diverge from that. You do also have some request guidelines, which state that depending on how much the event costs is how far in advance they have to request. So if the event costs more than $3,000, the student organization has to request within at least 60 days out. And if it costs more than I think like between 1,000 and 2,999, they have to request 45 days out. And if it costs less than $1,000, they can request 30 days out. So there are some deadlines around when they have to request based on how much they are requesting, because the more it costs, the more time they may need to plan for it, is the logic behind that. But if you wanted to go in a different direction from the $33 per head max, that's the maximum that they can be funded, then you could do that if you wanted, but you'd have to create some sort of guidelines for it. If you wanted to say, okay, the maximum we will be funding for these virtual events is, $2,000, then you'd have to pass some sort of legislation, or add something into your budgetary statutes through legislation around that. So.
Thank you. I was more so asking in the direction of like if we noticed it was like only one org or just like the same few orgs requesting, would we place in like a limit or just okay, thank you. And I think my second point was in regards to the 55% for fall, we would have to write legislation if you want. Again, this is all legislation that we'd have to write and pass to Senate and Finance Board in regards to changing the current system for this specific year. Okay, thank you.
All right, Victor.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about so for clubs that already submit like a proposal for this fall semester. So what if they can so do they have to like request for like a new budget for next spring if they can hold that event this fall, or do they just use that same proposal they already made for the next or for spring?
Candace answered in the chat. I don't know if you saw that.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you.
Okay. Along the lines of spring 2021, I feel like since we're acting basically a semester behind now, I feel like we should only worry about fall and try and get that out of the way. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that, but I feel like that would be a lot on our plate, especially since spring is we don't know. Like, we don't know what's going to happen if we're even going to be on campus. So I just wanted to bring that up as a thinking point. But so what I'm gathering is how much we should look into for Sahas. And I think another discussion point is, do we want to submit a request before the budget is done or after the budget is done? Another thing that was brought up was the timeline of how fall is going to work, I believe. Is this something we want to discuss now or save for another meeting? Joshua?
I'm sorry, I was about to talk and I unmuted myself and then I realized. I was going to say, agreeing with Aaliyah, I think that now is a good time to lay the groundwork of just being in agreement of we want to have a request put in within the next week and like setting those deadlines. And I also think that some of this work can be done outside of meetings. Realize that being a member of finance board isn't just within these hour-long meetings, but like some of the work does have to bleed out. I think that, we can find a balance for that.
I agree. So, I guess first order of business is Sahas. Do we want to request before the budget is finished? I feel like it would be a smart move to put our request in, and once the budget comes to us, we can see if it's being taken into consideration. I see a couple yeses before the budget. Okay. Do we want to hash out a number, an estimate, maybe? Or is that something we can do outside of a meeting? Acha?
I feel like before we can hash out a specific number, we need to do, I guess, like just more background research into like what events could realistically occur, and then how much money do we think we could go into those events. Like if we, I don't know, like if we like maybe outside and we all came together and just like come up with a number, because I don't think we can come up with that, like ballpark it right now. I think we need to like out, or maybe if you guys have an estimate, that could work too. But I don't think I can think of an estimate at this point.
Joshua?
I think that, one, I think she just raised a good point, but my only pushback against that would be, what if a student organization got like very, very creative and then we didn't budget that, right? And so I'm thinking that because Siri, I think you mentioned that you all already cut around like 120 or something from the 333 that's in that pot. So maybe if we even said like 200,000 or like 150, I think that those are good numbers to work with, because they aren't going to limit the capacity and they aren't going to limit the imagination of the student organizations that would be putting in those requests. I think that if we put too much thought into it, then we are going to be saying this is all that student organizations can do. And I honestly don't believe that. And I think that some people, like I said in previous meetings, they will get very, very creative, and we want to be able to support them, realizing that this is a hard time for student organizations, and they don't really have the brick and mortar location where they can live out their mission statements. So we need to be able to provide for them in whatever other ways. So I think that starting a little high and going, you should always aim higher, and then you can bargain down a little bit more. But I think that that's just something I wanted to raise.
Siri, go ahead.
Yes, and I could pretty much see like how you guys are thinking. I like understand me and Rashad also thought of that, because just like talking to OCSS, and when we had like a meeting, like I think like in June with like the different orgs, they were thinking about the different ways they can still like switch stuff like Good Morning Commuters to be like virtual now, and I am in support of student orgs being creative, but I'm also a realist, especially when you're dealing with budgets. So while I would love for them to like be able to do a lot of things, it's also important that stuff get cut down, because we agreed to cut down our student activities fee to 50%. So since we're not, charging that much, we have a little limited amount of funds to, give out, or we'll be reaching a lot into our reserves. So of course we thought of all of that, and I would love to hear you guys estimate you want, just so me and Rashad. It doesn't have to be today, any time this week, this weekend, next week. But also I want us to like kind of be realistic with the budget, because right now we know for sure it's going to be like $250,000 cut, but that number could increase depending on how much like our what am I trying to say, Candace? Depending on student enrollment.
Enrollment.
Yes, depending on student enrollment, that number can increase, because we have been hearing across that some people are taking a gap year, some people just don't want to like go to like pay for school right now when most stuff are online. So me and Rashad do plan on making different scenarios of like a budget, maybe like 100,000. We're reaching into reserve, 70,000. We plan on making different scenarios for the budget, but I do want you guys to definitely keep in mind that, you know, we definitely did agree to cut student activities fees. So while they can be creative, we definitely need some money cut. So I know you guys are gonna try to like shoot for the biggest, but let's please try to be, you know, realistic. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Siri. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a point? Okay, so this is just my opinion. We don't have to go with it, obviously, but I think it would be good for us to do some thinking on this by ourselves and come together outside of a meeting and come up with a budget request for Sahas, only because there are some things that we can and can't fund. I don't know if those requirements exist for Sahas, Candace, like a general body meeting. And okay, so scratch that last part then. But I do think that this is something that we should each take some time on, think about, come together, maybe outside of like a formal setting and create that request. As well as the timeline. I don't think that needs to be done in person in a meeting. But those are just my thoughts. If anyone has anything that they'd like to discuss on those points.
Hey, sorry, I was just gonna add one more thought. I was gonna say when me, Candace, and Rashad were doing the budget, what we did, which helped, was of course looking at last year's spending, just looking at the percentages and the amounts that were spent last year. I think it was like 55% for the fall. And we're looking at how much was like allocated for Sahas, and we're just also looking at the student fee cut, and we kind of were trying to see how much we can leave in there and still be okay. So definitely a good place to start is just like reviewing what was used in the past and then thinking about the 250,000 or possibly more that has been cut and going from there, just if you wanted like a starting point.
Acha?
So I'm a bit I'm a bit confused because I feel like sometimes I hear $250,000 has been cut, and then other times I hear $250,000 is what we're working with. So which one is it?
Candace?
Sort of both, right? So last year, SGA asked for what the projected revenue would be for this year for $1.1 million. And so that means half of that $1 million is collected in the fall, half of it is collected in the spring. So $500,000 in the fall, $500,000 in the spring. You voted to reduce the student activity fee for the fall by 50%. That means you've cut that fee, the amount you're collecting in the fall, from 500,000 to 250. So you've both cut $250,000 and you are collecting $250,000 in the fall. In addition, the student activity fee, or not, so the student organization pot, it was allocated at $333,000. And the amount that was for fall events, that was for fall 2020, that was allocated was about $120,000. So that is where Siri and Rashad got that $120,000 number from, which leaves you with like $213,000. So they're both 200 numbers. And so maybe there's some confusion around when people are saying what. But right now, what's left tentatively in the budget that Siri and Rashad are working on, and it could change, what's left in the tentative budget right now to be presented to Senate and Finance Board is a total student organization budget allocation of about $210,000. And you voted to reduce your income, right? Reduce the amount of money that SGA is getting by $250,000 over the course of the year. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
cool. Yeah.
Joshua?
So I think that as we transition to discussing this offline for like the next week or so, can all of those numbers be put in like one Google document so that we can reference those when we're having that conversation, and we have that to bear in mind when we're coming up with these numbers? And I suppose that would be towards like Candace and Siri.
I mean, the projected revenue from the projected revenue prior to your student activity fee cut can be put in a document. How much you're projecting to collect for the fall can be put in a document. But what the number is in the tentative budget, or like how much, I guess, the amount of money for all of the on-campus events that got canceled, that can be put somewhere. Yes, but that the amount of money that is going to be put in the budget for student organizations depends on conversations are with the campus partners and what you all ask for. That those two things are going to inform that final number that's put in the budget. So that final number, it could be 200,000. You could say, well, we only want to have $25,000 for fall. So then maybe they reduce that number by that much. But I think you need to, there are some they're not even hard and fast, honestly, but some projections that we can put somewhere to help inform that conversation for sure. I just want to make sure that people know that those numbers can change, right? What was projected in revenue for SGA last spring is definitely not, even if you were collecting the whole fee, given COVID, is not what you would have been collecting. I don't think you would have collected $1 million this year, all things considered, if you were collecting the full fee and we were doing COVID. Experiencing COVID, being whatever COVID. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. And also, I think my internet's bad. I don't know.
Pooja?
So considering the uncertainty of the dollar amount, like we don't know what exact the dollar amount is going to be, and it's subject to change, wouldn't it be wise for us to work on the percentage of that amount that will be allocated to Sahas? That's just the suggestion I wanted to make. Like, think on how much you want to increase from 10%. Let's say, do you want to make that percentage 15 or 20, or do you keep it 10? Or that's something I was thinking.
That's a good point. If everyone would like to go in that direction, we can. In the chat, if you want to agree to that. Okay, Acha. Yeah. It is a good point. Yeah. Wow, it is storming very bad. So if I cut out, I'm sorry. So given that our Sahas is 10% of our allocations, what would be a good ballpark to raise it up to? Because again, the numbers for the budget are still wishy-washy. They could change. We don't want to lowball it or highball it or put us in a situation that we can't get ourselves out of. Not that I see that happening, but Pooja?
So way I was thinking of coming up with the percentage was to just look at so the suggestion that CD made, like look at the past budgets and see how the funding was approved and come up with a number, and then based on the number convert that to the percentage and compare it with the 10% and see how much do you want to increase that 10% to. I mean, there could be multiple ways to approach the situation. Like you can come up with a different percentage by using some different method, but that's just something that came up in my mind. Like look at what's been in the past, convert the difference or the amount that we spend for funding to the percentage, and then figure out the difference and add that difference to 10%.
Yeah, that makes sense. Candace, where would I be able to find those documents? Because personally, if I can't find them or get access to them, I think that's something that will affect us talking about this in the meeting.
Yeah, so I wasn't clear on what Pooja was asking for in terms of how much was spent. Are you asking for how much money was allocated for fall 2020? Are you asking for how much money was allocated out of Sahas previous semesters?
Actually, both, because
Okay.
now that we're not funding in-person events, like if we just have a good idea of the number that we funded for, that we use, I mean, the amount that we fund those events and the amount that we had for Sahas, and like try and come up with a combination of what could be the possible amount that we might need to have to support the student organizations that are coming up with the virtual ways of hosting their events.
Yeah, I can tell you that for fall, for on-campus events, you allocated about $120,000, a little under, maybe 116, something like that, for this fall. That's what was allocated. Sahas was pretty lightly used. There were some requests, but yes, that data does exist in the legislation tracker, and we can work through that, Sierra, if you want. I don't know if you want to do that right now, or do you want to do it outside of the meeting and get those numbers today?
Wow, sorry, there's a lot of feedback right now. But personally, I would like to do it outside of the meeting because we do have something else on the agenda. But and also, I kind of want a more definitive answer on the numbers for the budget. Not like, oh, here's the budget, but you know, if that makes sense. Pooja?
No, yeah, I was gonna say it will be better if we do it outside the meeting because we'll definitely need more time to do that.
Okay, so with that, what I'm gathering is the timelines, Sahas, and the percentage we want to look at, as well as the request for putting it in the budget. It's all going to be done outside the meeting. Candace, I see you in the chat. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So that's fine. That's cool. Yeah, I want to make sure that everyone is on board with some kind of communication going out to student organizations about how they will be requesting funds for the fall. I don't think you need to have a dollar amount. I don't think you need to tell them. I don't think you need to have that, but I do think you need to say, we know that all the events are canceled. Per our guidelines, since your events are canceled, that money's going to go back to us. In addition, there's all of these guidelines out there about events on campus and restrictions. And because of that, and because of all kinds of other reasons, SGA reduced. Is that feedback coming from me?
I think so.
Better if I
Her
do
mic's
this?
on. It might be you speaking through her laptop and then being picked up
Oh,
another microphone that she's using.
okay. There we go. So yeah, so communicating to them how we know your events are canceled, and because your events are canceled, all that money rolls back. There's lots of restrictions about student events on campus. Therefore, and part of the reason why, that's why SGA is reducing the student activity fee. And because of that, stuff can happen. And we still want to promote events on campus, or virtual events for students. And so we are going to be allowing all orgs to request through the Sahas process. And we'll have more information coming about that process. You know, you're encouraging virtual events. I do think that's something to come out from you all about that sooner rather than later. At least by the beginning of August. So putting that in your brain.
Sounds good. Aaliyah?
I wanted to say that we, me, Candace, and Sierra, we already kind of discussed about like sending, like an email to the student org presidents and like the treasurers about how funding was being cut. So would you want the information about how, like how requesting money would be different? Should that be included in that email that will be sent out?
Are you slated to meet next week? Yes.
Wait, what did you say?
Are you all meeting next week?
For the email?
Well, no. Do you have a final to do next week, or could you?
I think it would depend on how this meeting goes and what happens in the steering committee meeting.
Okay. I think if you have some concrete information about the request process, then you should send it all out together, and maybe you can hold off on that email that we talked about. So maybe you could send all of that out, not this Friday, but next Friday.
Okay.
Do we want to schedule a meeting next week? Can. Okay. I'll send out an invitation for that after this meeting. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Because I feel like this discussion is coming to an end. How much we've decided on for outside of this meeting. Okay, I don't see anyone in chat. So just want to reiterate, timeline, Sahas percentage, and requesting for the budget is something that we're going to be doing outside of this meeting. Look for an email communication on that so that we can work on that together. Is everyone okay with ending discussion? Is there a motion?
I move to end Sahas funding discussion for fall 2020.
I second.
Any objections? I don't hear any objections. On consent, we are ending discussion on Sahas funding for fall 2020. And with that, we are going to look at this joint resolution, which I hope all of you had a chance to look at. Joshua, I know that you had another conference that you had to go to at 6, but you're still here. So I know that you wrote this. Would you like to introduce it?
Yeah. Just to give a little bit of background, this is based off of the entire ruling that was announced probably about 2 weeks ago that put our international students at UBC in jeopardy, in my opinion. And so we wanted to, one, represent all the international students, and two, tell them that they had a place at UBC, and then three, express our support from the SGA to them, because often I find that there's like this bucket of students that like they're all involved in SGA endeavors, and then there's also this bucket that isn't necessarily touched. And I feel like we need to be doing a little bit of outreach. So this resolution really just speaks to those different points, and we're going to be reaching out to the International Student Services Department, asking, or I'm sorry, National Educational Services Department, asking them to circulate this resolution to express our support. But I do have to log off, so I'm sorry to jump.
You're completely fine. I know that you have other things to go to. With that, is there a motion to enter discussion?
I move to enter discussion on AR 03/2021.
I say.
Any objections? I hear no objections, so by general consent, we are entering discussion on JR 03/2021.
Well, I'll say I think this is a really I like this. Why do we see there was an echo again? Is there still an echo?
I think it's just somebody, they must not have headphones on or something, and it's picking up sound from whatever they're using, and just the microphone is picking that up and just shooting it all back to us. So,
Okay.
anyways, keep going.
Well, I agree with Joshua in that SGA also has a responsibility to do more outreach, especially because I've been talking to people and they've been saying just throughout this whole process they feel like UMBC hasn't done the best job of keeping them continually informed. So I definitely feel like I'm definitely for this piece of legislation.
Yeah. Pooja?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say something very similar to what Asha said. Like, this is something that we should do, and it just shows international students that we're here for them. So yeah, that's all I have to say. No objections to this piece of legislation.
I agree with all that. If anyone else has any speaking points, they can go ahead and let me know in the chat. But Acha.
So it says that we would work with IES. Would that be outside? Like how do we plan on doing that? Like would a chair or someone else like personally reach out to them, and would we have to help draft that email, or how do we plan on doing this if we moving forward, if it passes?
Frankly, I think that just means SGA as a whole. I didn't write this, and Joshua's not here to elaborate more, but I think it comes down to everyone in SGA should have a part in supporting international students because that's just what we do. We support the undergraduate population. How we do that, I'm not entirely sure. That might be a question for Kai, Joshua, and Patrick. If you want, you can shoot them an email, or I can figure out something from them and just signal boost it to the entire board. But I'm not sure how that would work. Does that make sense?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, concerns, queries? Gerson?
So this right here, to support the international students, it's just to work in tangent with IES, correct? There's no stated, at least, actual resolution or way to help, correct? So would that be addressed to Joshua, the one who wrote this, is to think of things to help them, or how could I get in contact with him? What's his email?
Yes, Joshua would definitely be the one to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know his email off the top of my head. Oh gosh. It's probably just Jay Gray at UMBC, and Kai and Patrick.
Okay.
Is the SGA website updated with all the new officers yet? No. Okay, I was gonna say go to the SGA website and look at that, but it's not updated yet. Gerson, if you look in the chat, his email is there.
Thank
But
you.
yes, they are definitely open to suggestions to bring to IES and the university as a whole. So they would definitely love your feedback.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Pooja and my dogs, apparently.
So I know I said that no objection to this legislation, but now that I'm thinking, should we table this for now and ask Joshua the questions that we have in the next meeting before we vote on this? Or should we just move on to vote on this? Like, do we need to know? We want to actually know the details on how SGA is planning to help international students. Like, do we want to know the process? Or just email them?
I think that is a good point. I was not able to attend the steering committee this past Sunday. I don't know if this was discussed. No? Okay. This was presented to me last minute as a thing to just throw on the agenda that I know Joshua wanted to be voted on. But if you are concerned with some of the language, we can wait. Aaliyah?
I was at the steering committee meeting when Joshua introduced this legislation, and he didn't really go into detail about it. He just kind of said this. He said that he had made this, and then he kind of gave a brief summary of what it was. But yeah, to let you guys know.
Pooja?
In that case, I think I would want to know the details. So if board agrees, I think we should table the resolution for now.
Is everyone okay with that? All right, Siri says that he wanted to send out an email. If you know more, you're allowed to speak on it. But if you don't, that's totally okay.
Yeah, like I was at the steering committee meeting also, and he did talk about it, and we all said we supported it. Everyone that was at the meeting, and I know that he just wanted to mainly like send out an email to show like solidarity and that SGA supports international students and what they're going through at the moment. That's pretty much the extent to which he talked about it.
Frankly, take this with a grain of salt. I myself am not an international student, but given the circumstances that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we can't be on campus, and there's not really events that we can host, like Pangea, for example. We couldn't have that right now because of COVID. I think the email is a good course of action, and personally, I think that's what was going to happen anyways, despite not being there at the steering committee meeting. If everyone wants to come to a general consensus on tabling it, we can do that, but then again, everyone has a vote in this, so please let me know what you think. Acha?
I'm personally comfortable with voting now, but if enough people are opposed to voting until we have the chance to get, well, personally speak to Joshua, then that's fine as well. But I think just looking at the legislation and hearing what everyone else has to say, I think I have enough information to move forward with it. But if anyone else has objections, then I'm also okay with tabling.
Pooja?
So, like Siri said, that if all we're doing with this legislation is sending out an email to show them our support, that's fine. Then I guess we should just vote on this. I'm okay with it.
Gerson?
I personally object to voting on it right now, and I'd rather hold off to see for us to be able to do more, I guess. I wouldn't just want to send out an email to show support. I would see if there's anything we can do capable of helping even more, although it's hard in these circumstances, but I would like to object that motion.
Thank you for your input. We will consider it, but unfortunately you are not a voting member. But you are a member of our undergraduate population and you matter to us. So with that, thank you for that statement.
Thank you. I forgot, but thank you.
You're totally fine. I know being here, you're just like in it to win it. Acha?
I don't. Well, just looking at the wording of the document itself, especially where it says we'll work with international students through IES and other platforms, I feel like it doesn't stop at just the email, and I feel like the resolution itself, I mean, it like leaves enough room for us to like work even after it's passed to do more than just an email. But again, if we're not comfortable until we have discussed it more, that's fine as well.
Hey, sorry, can I jump in? So I just texted Joshua for clarification. He said it will be an email to be sent, but that's not its sole purpose, if that makes sense. And he said that we are having a meeting next week, so that's fine if we do table it for or postpone voting until then.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you for that information. Pooja?
Sorry, I'm just gonna repeat what I said in chat. The point that Garson, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. The point that you brought up, and after what Siri said, I think we should table it. Like, we should get into the details of it.
Okay. Any more points? I don't think there's much else to talk about. But it's up to you guys as well.
So If we want to table it, do we have to move to end discussion and then table, or just move to table?
Yeah.
The second or the first?
Sorry, we have to end discussion first.
Oh, okay. Well, I move to end discussion.
I second that.
Any objections? I don't hear any, so by general consent, we are ending discussion on JR 03-2021. Is there a motion to approve this piece of legislation? Remember, approving the legislation opens for voting, I believe. I think you can make a motion to table it indefinitely, and then we can get a second and by general consent and all that.
I move to table JR 03-2021
To next week.
to next week.
I second.
Are there any objections? I don't hear any objections. I don't see any. So with that, JR 03-2021 is tabled until next week. I was about to say indefinitely. And with that, we are done with everything on the agenda. If I can find it again. All right, so are there any announcements? Candace.
I would like to promote the online leadership challenge that is currently being run by Campus Life and the lovely Beatriz Gutierrez Malagon, one of the advisors for Senate. If you follow Campus Life on social media, you can participate that way, or you can participate through the MyUMBC page, or I think it's on their Facebook page too. But if you participate and you earn the most number of points, there's different things that you can do on each post to earn points. You can win a $50 bookstore gift card.
I just wanted to remind everybody that I'm if you have like a conflict of interest or you have a student org that you want to work in for the coming like semester, then please tell me by tomorrow, because I'm making like the which orgs go to who, so you know that information is needed. And also something that we will be doing, a part of the liaison system, like when we like get the orgs, is that like when you email, when an org reaches out to you, we're gonna have a tracking system so that like every time an org reaches out to you, like the groups you get, then you would like track it and you would put it in our document. So I just wanted to like let you guys know about some stuff that we're gonna have. Just put it on your radar. Once we get once everybody has their like groups, we'll talk about it more. I just wanted to put that out there. And yeah.
Any other announcements?
Oh, well, sorry, I should have said me. Did everyone join WebEx Teams already? Like, did everyone move to that platform? Because that's where they said we're going to continue we're not using Slack anymore. That is outdated, I think, in the past. So I just want to make sure everyone's on WebEx Teams so we can communicate efficiently and all be on the same page. So yeah, there was an email sent by Mershad and Zachary with invitations. So yeah.
Thank you for bringing that back up. Any other announcements? If not, I just want to put it all on your radar again. A fall retreat is happening. We will be sending out stuff hopefully the end of this month, beginning of August. And also, Aaliyah and I are going to send out some questions you'll get an email with all that. You'll know what that's for once we get to fall retreat, but just want to put that all on your radar. And if there are no more announcements, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Give you like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. All right. Well, I adjourned this meeting at 6:26 p.m. For the final roll call, I recognize that Pooja is here, Acha is here, Aaliyah is here, Siri is here, and Victor is here, as well as ex officio members Candace and Courtney, as well as Gerson with the undergraduate population. And I'm going to stop recording, and we can do pass the gavel.